What's going on, everyone? My name is Jeremiah, and today what we're going to do is a walkthrough. We're going to do two things. We're going to do a walkthrough through Forest from Hack the Box, which is an easy Windows box, and then I'm going to focus on how I take notes. So notes are important for finding syntax from your old boxes in case you need it. It's also important for the OSCP for report writing. So you want to take good notes, and I'm going to show you how to do that today. So let's start with, since we're going to do Forest, we will start with adding a page on here and then doing Forest. I always put our IP address in here. So there's our IP. And then from here, we will go over to the Kali. And I've already ran nmap just because a full port scan takes a minute. So we ran nmap, and then we're going to enumerate service versions, and then we're going to run scripts against those against the ports that are open on our IP address. We're going to do -v for verbose, so that shows all of this. If you don't do this, then I'm impatient and it won't show anything until the whole scan's done, which could take a few minutes. So like I said, I'm impatient, so I just like to watch it run. And then we're doing all ports. So the ending of this is these are all the ports that it discovered. And then this is after the service, the version enumeration, so it's getting a banner, and then all the scripts run against it. So once this is done, what I do is I take this and I copy all the way up to here. And then I go over to Kali, and then I just paste it in here. All right, and then I start looking at what ports are open, right? So I will go through each port. So this is DNS. See, it says DNS over here. And then 88 is Kerberos. And then here's all the Kerberos stuff. And then RPC 135, 139, 389. So the first thing I think of whenever we're going through these ports is that this is a domain controller, because DNS is running on it. You have Kerberos running on it. You have LDAP, and then LDAP Secure, which is 636. And then you have the other LDAP, the other LDAP Secure, 3269. So that immediately tells me that this is a domain controller. Now, what we need to do is go through here. I just highlight all of the open ports so I can see them clear. All the important ones, like you'll get up to these higher, like RPC ports. I'll look through here and make sure that's just not some random port that they're putting as a high port for an HTTP server or some FTP server or something like that. But all these are RPC, so I'm not too worried about that unless I don't find anything anywhere else. So from here, looking at this, what I would do first is 445, so Windows Standard, Hack the Box. So LDAP, whenever there's LDAP on here, what's cool is if you enumerate the versions, it'll give you the domain. So now we know that the domain is hackthebox.local, which is going to be important here in a minute. And then that, and then if we go down, we go into the script results, which it ran scripts against SMB. So this should also give us a domain, which is our domain name is hackthebox.local, and then our fully qualified domain name is forest.hackthebox.local. So the fully qualified domain name is just the name of the machine plus the domain. So from here, what I like to do is I will go down a little bit, and then I'll make a to-do list. And on this one, what I would do is enumerate RPC and NetBIOS along with SMB. So we will do 135, 139, 445, and then what we will do, actually we'll put those like that. And then we will do a null session on the SMB. We'll also do a guest session. And then we will do enum for Linux. Okay, and then that's usually what I do right out the get-go for that. And then what I'm doing right now, I just need like low-hanging fruit. So I'm looking at what's the easiest path, what's the fastest path to get some credentials from here. There's obviously no port 80, there's no HTTP port, there's no web server on here, so we're trying to parse through the rest of the information. So we do have, if we do get credentials, we do have a WinRM, which is 5985. So from there, I would probably do dig with DNS. So can't find anything there. I would do 53, which is DNS. We will do dig, zone transfer, and then from there I would do like LDAP, which let's do LDAP, and then we would do LDAP search, which is the tool for that. And then if I forget, so sometimes like I forget like what tools we use where and like what the syntax and stuff are. This is what's so important about notes, is I can go into my notebook and I'll do like LDAP. This is like the main note keeping part, which is called the one piece. So if we go to the one piece over here on the right, you can see like my basic methodology, and I have each port laid out. So like if we had FTP, you know, this is like how I would connect to it. If that's not working, then telnet. And then if I wanted to put files on it or get files on it, or if I wanted to brute force, I have everything in here that I need to do with FTP port. So if we're doing something with LDAP, which is 389 and 636, I come to here and then I can see like LDAP search and then our host sh. So I just put in the IP address there, and then the port, which is just regular LDAP 389. If you need to do LDAP S, so secure, we'll do that, and then -X and -B. I honestly don't even remember what these flags are for, but I've used it before, so I just put it in here so I remember what the syntax is. And then DC, whatever the website is, .com. So make sure that whenever you use something, you have like a main note where you're putting all of your actual notes into. So mine is called the one piece. You know, you can obviously call it whatever you want. So we'll go back to forest. And so after LDAP, there's a few other things that you could do, but we'll just keep it at that for right now so we don't go too far in the weeds, and we can try to enumerate some of this stuff. So first thing we'll do is null session, guest session, and enum for Linux. So we will come back to our Kali and null session. So how I like to enumerate SMB is through crackmap exec. So crackmap exec, I use it for a few reasons, but I'll show you why here in a minute. So we'll put in the IP address, 164.24, and then user, we'll just keep it as nothing because we're doing a null session. And then password, we'll also do nothing. And then we'll connect, see what happens. So this plus sign means that we actually connected. And then the reason I like crackmap is because it automatically enumerates your domain name too. If you don't have LDAP in your, or SMB in your nmap scan, then this can give you a quick domain name. So with this, what we'll do is we'll add this to our Etsy host file. So Etsy host, so I already have one in here, I should. So 10.129, 164.24. Okay. And then what I do is I was watching the IPSEC video not too long ago, and he was doing a box that did not have NTLM enabled. So he had to use Kerberos for everything. And there was some idiosyncrasy in there where you had to put some tool wouldn't work. I can't remember what it was. Some tool wouldn't work unless the fully qualified domain name was first in your Etsy host, and then your domain was second. So ever since I watched that, I always just put the fully qualified domain name first. All right, and then we'll get out of this. And then we'll go back to the crackmap exec. So we'll do crackmap. And so what I'll do is I'll do --shares to show the shares. Okay, so we can't even see the shares with the null session. So we will go to guest, see what happens. So guest account is disabled. Okay, so what I do is I go back to my notes and I will say null session enabled and authenticated, but no shares. All right, and then guest session, I will just straight up X out. Okay, so now we have that, but we can't do anything with this yet because there's no shares to be shown with the null session. So we're going to run enum for Linux. So we will go enum for Linux 10, 129, 164, 24. All right. So if you haven't heard of enum for Linux, this is pretty awesome because it'll enumerate LDAP, it'll enumerate RPC, it'll enumerate SMB. So it'll find things like the domain if you don't already have it. It'll find things like your password policy, users, groups. It'll find a whole lot of stuff. There's a lot of, not a lot, but there's a few boxes you see up here that it has like the administrator account. We'll find an actual account. So here's Andy's account, right? It'll give you his full name. And then also sometimes there will be like passwords in the description of the username. So you can get that from here. But what we're interested in is just the usernames. So we'll take this block of usernames here and we'll copy it. This is also getting, so one of the other things I'll look at too when I'm in here is the password policy. So this password policy has a length of 7. So it has to be either 7 or more. If you're doing a brute force, you can eliminate a lot of passwords from rocku.txt that are 6 letters or less, or 6 characters or less. So this will eliminate a lot of time if you're brute forcing. It can also be, so you see how this says account lockout threshold here is none. So you're not in danger. You can brute force as many passwords as you want on a username if you're not trying to be stealthy for any of these usernames that we're about to use if you need the brute force, and it's not going to lock out the account. Sometimes this will say 5 or 10 or whatever it is, so you kind of have to keep it, you have to keep it underneath whatever the account lockout threshold is. But most of the time on these easy boxes, there is no lockout threshold. And if you do get locked out, it'll tell you exactly how long it is. So you just have to go get something to eat while you're locked out. So is this still enumerating? Yeah, so this will get your built-in group memberships, like, getting local groups, getting your domain groups, which will come in handy later, but we don't need them right now. And then who's in like this local group or this domain group, which is domain users, which is everybody. So we're going to get out of that. And then we are going to remove that one. And then we'll make a users.txt. And then we'll paste our usernames in here. Now, if you're good at Vim, you can use Vim to cut this up and just get the usernames, because that's what we're looking for, is just these usernames right here. So we got to get rid of all this other stuff. I'm not very good with Vim, so I'm going to do this in Bash. So we will do cat users, and we already have most of it here. So we will do cut and then a delimiter. Our first delimiter, we'll just go back and we'll do this first. So what we want to do is cut this on the first delimiter of this square bracket. So this square bracket, the first one we're going to use is this one right here on all of these lines. So what we're trying to say is we're going to cut it this line on this bracket, and then we're going to tell Bash what side of that bracket we want to keep, which is called -F for field. So we're going to say we want to keep, for cutting it right here, we want to get rid of all this. So we want to keep field 2, which we will get all of this. So field 2, okay. So now you notice that everything, including that bracket to the left, is gone. So we're going to do the same thing and cut on a delimiter of that second bracket. And then we're going to keep field 1. So if we're cutting right here, all of this would be field 2. We want to keep field 1 of everything. And then we're going to overwrite the user.txt file that's already there. Okay, and that's what we have. So Now we're going to get rid of all of these wacky usernames for the mailboxes. So we'll go back into Vim. And I'm going to use visual block. So Control V will do visual block. Then you just use your arrow keys to highlight all of this, and then push D, and then it gets rid of it. Like I said, I'm not very good at Vim, so I'm sure there's another way you can do that that's much easier. Default account we don't care about. Curb TGT we don't care about. And guest was disabled. We saw it earlier. We don't care about. So now we're left with those 7 usernames. We're going to get out of Vim. And the next thing that we're going to do on this box, since we have usernames, but we don't have any passwords, so we are going to do something called an AsRep roast. So InPacket has a module already for AsRep roasting called get NP users. So it's InPacket-get NP users. And the NP, I think, stands for no pre-authentication. I'll show that to you in a minute. And then the HTB.local is the domain. The DC IP, which is just the IP of our box. And then the users file that we're going to AsRep roast. So now you'll notice that some of these have UF don't require pre-auth, right? And then we actually get one from Service Alfresco account that gives us some sort of a hash back. So whenever you're doing an attack like this, what I did at the beginning to kind of understand, not kind of understand, but to really understand what was happening here, is to go to a home lab and research it and understand exactly what is happening. So AsRep roasting one is pretty easy. We'll go to, I already have my home lab DC spun up, and then we will go to users and computers. Okay, and then this is probably pretty small. So I have a bunch of users that I already added into this domain. All of these are Brooke, Frankie, Jinbei, Monkey D, Luffy, Nami. These are all One Piece characters. So what we're going to do is if we right click, let's say Roanoa Zoro, and then we go to properties, and then we go to account, there are account options that are here. If you go all the way to the bottom, there's an option that says do not require Kerberos pre-authentication. If this is not checked like it is, this is default on, I don't know when they changed it, but I know 2016, 2022 servers, this comes as default as not checked. So when this is not checked, you will get this right here. User Sebastian doesn't have UF don't require pre-auth. So you're not getting any type of hash. You're not getting the ticket from Kerberos for this because it wants you to authorize with a username and password with this. But if you check this and apply, then this doesn't need a username and password to pre-authorize to give you this hash for a ticket. So that's at a high level how that works. So now we're going to take this AsRep roasting hash, and we're going to let's echo that, into, so I'm just echoing this hash into the username.hash. All right. So now we have service alfresco.hash. We're going to use John, tac word list, and then our equals, and then our word list. So user share word list rocku.text, and then service alfresco.hash. So I already cracked this before, so we're going to have to, we'll go to cd root. cd.john, and then we will remove john.pot. That's where it keeps all the cracked passwords, just so I can show you what's happening. We'll run this again. And I like John. A lot of people use Hashcat, but I like John on these like CAPTCHA flag type boxes that are going to crack in 2 seconds, because I don't have to put the type of hash in here most of the time. Like John will look through here and see it says loaded 1 password hash. It already knows that this is a Kerberos ASREP hash. You can also do this with Hashcat, but like I said, like this is just faster for me. And it cracked it, and we're at service. Services is password. So now that we have domain credentials, we are going to go back over to our OneNote. Okay, so we found that enum for Linux works, and we're just going to catch up on our notes right now. So we're going to add another note, part of the note, then we're going to make that a sub page, so that way we can collapse and open that up. And we're going to name this one, we'll just do 135, 139, 445, and then RPC NetBIOS, which is 139, and then SMB. And then we'll go enum for Linux output gave us usernames. And we will go back to, okay, we will go back to this. We'll screenshot it. So these are my usernames for enum for Linux. And then we use bash to cut up the usernames and put them in a text file. Okay, so that tells me how I did that, and also the cat afterwards, and then use vim to okay. Boom, okay. So then we have the usernames, and then we are going to put in here how we ASREP roasted it. So using mpacket dash get np users, we ASREP roasted the list of usernames to get a TGT hash. All right, and then we are going to, we cracked the ASREP hash with John the Ripper. And we come, now have domain credentials of SVC alfresco and service. So every time I find something I get so far in a box, what I'll do is I'll just catch up. Like this is a good point just to catch up now that you have credentials, and catch up on all your notes, make sure that everything's good to go, and then now we will move on. So with this hash, all right, So with this hash, we can also use crack map exec to, not with this hash, with these credentials, we can take service alfresco, which is the username, and then service. And we're just going to try it against SMB right now. See if that works. And it did work. So we can go crack map exec shares. So this is going to list all the shares. So these two shares, they're not really anything special right now. You can find some credentials sometimes in sysvol, which is the group policy folder, but that's a later on thing that if nothing else works, that's like my last resort. So now that we don't have anything for that, what we can do is crack map exec works on a whole lot of different protocols. So that's an SMB. So we'll just do nothing to show you. Then we have, we can use LDAP, we can use WinRM, we can use SSH, MS SQL, FTP. RDP, I have never gotten it to work on. It won't work on RDP for some reason. I have to use like Xfree RDP or another tool to enumerate that, and then SMB. So what we're going to do is, the only thing that was open, LDAP was open, WinRM was open, SSH was not, MS SQL was not, FTP was not, and SMB is open. So we'll try WinRM next. It's going to error out because I have shares. Cool. So now we see that these credentials work for WinRM. So now we can sign into WinRM using evil WinRM. So evil WinRM -I, which is your IP address, and then that is wrong, 24, and then your username, and then your password. Press enter. Should be logging in anytime now. Oh, we're not logging in because the IP address is still wrong. This is 164. Cool. So we're in, and usually the user will be, the user.txt is on desktop. So there's your user.txt. So now we'll catch up a little bit again. So we'll go back to our OneNote, and then now that we have these credentials working, I will say credentials were successful on WinRM using crack map exec, and then we will get a screenshot of that. Boom. And then we will say, we'll get a screenshot of us logging in, Evo WinRM, right there. All right, and then what I do is I always move to WinRM as SVC alfresco. I leave this as a note at the end so that way I kind of know where I'm going next. We'll add a page, make a sub page. Then we'll put in here WinRM as service alfresco. Now that we have WinRM as alfresco, the first thing, let's move over to the Kali. The first thing that I do whenever I have Windows credentials and I'm on a Windows machine is I run whoami/all. This will give me all of the groups that I'm in and also all of the privileges that I have for the user that you're signed in as. These user groups, there's nothing in here, so we are remote management users. That's what allowed us to log in as WinRM. Account operators. Privileged IT accounts is kind of suspicious. And then the service accounts, we already knew that because the SVC at the beginning. So there's nothing like crazy in here that would mean any type of privilege escalation right off the get-go. And then we go down to privileges. There's nothing in here too. We might be able to use this later to add workstations to a domain. There's a few attacks that deal with that. But as of right now, like there's nothing crazy special that we can see here. So what I do is we would probably use Bloodhound to enumerate this DC and the group policy objects and all the domain credentials, and or not credentials, but all the privileges, the ACLs, the everything inside the domain to see, to give us a path to go on. So we will, so you can do this one or two ways. You can either put something called sharphound on the actual machine, which you don't want to do unless you have to. And these capture flags, it doesn't matter, but I will use something called Bloodhound Python. So here's Bloodhound Python. So you can run this from your machine. So you don't have to put any type of executable or PowerShell script on the remote machine. Then you have your username, your password, your domain, and then the name server, which is the DNS server that the domain is using. In this case, it's the same as the DC. So this is 164.24, and then your collection method is all. So let's run that. And you can see that's getting the TGT, the ticket granting ticket for the users, connecting the LDAP to the fully qualified domain name. And we found one domain. One domain's in the forest with 2 computers, with 32 users, 76 groups, 2 group policy objects, 15 OUs, 20 containers, 0 trusts. So there's actually another computer on here called Exchange 01, right? And then our DC, which is forest. So now if we ls, we can see that we have all these JSON files here. So there's 2 things to Bloodhound. I'm not going to get into like how to install or use Bloodhound too much right now, but we can make another video on that. The 2 things that we do need though are Neo4j. So if you do Neo4j console, it's going to start up a instance on this machine. So localhost 7687, and if we go here and we I forgot the HTTP. Home HTTP. Didn't work either. Let's do. Just copy this whole thing. All right, so we're signed in. When you first start this, you have a default username and password of Neo4j, and then Neo4j for your password as well. So then you sign in, it's going to make you create a new password. You create a new password, and then this will start up. So we don't need this though. So now we are going to create another tab, and then we will run just Bloodhound. Okay, and then we have Bloodhound, then we use the username and password that you created before. So Neo4j and then whatever your password is. Then you can save that so it'll automatically log in next time. All right, so if you've already done this before, what you can do is go to this little hamburger over here, go all the way to the bottom, and then we will clear database, clear it, and all the information is gone. So now we need to import all of the JSON files that we have. So if you do xdg-open and then open it in the dot, so your current directory, it'll open up a file explorer there, and then we will take Bloodhound down a little bit, copy these, and then just drag them over, and then it'll upload everything. All right, clear finish when it's uploaded. If you push it a few times, it's funny, it just says really, and it stays up there until you exit out. Then you exit out of that, and then the first thing that I do is I search for the users that I have control of already. So if I have credentials for SVC Alfresco, I'll right click and then mark user as owned, push that little skull right there. And then the second thing I'll do is I'll click on the user that I have owned and then go through all of their overview. So their sessions, reachable high value targets 10, that's interesting. Then we'll keep going down. You can see like this will, this account is as reproducible, cannot be delegated, password never expires, true, etc., etc. So we'll keep going down. So we can see that we have unrolled group memberships. So if we click on that, we can see, so this starts with Service Alfresco, and then these are all the memberships that Alfresco has. So these are all groups. So these are nested groups. So this Alfresco is a part of the service accounts group, which is a part of the privileged IT accounts group, which is a part of the account operators group. So basically, the only thing you have to remember of is if he is a member of this, which is a member of this, which is a member of this, essentially Alfresco is a member of the account operators group. So you're like trying to find misconfigurations of group nesting and path to, get to either a lateral movement or a vertical movement in your privilege escalation. So there's nothing crazy there. So we'll go down. So there's nothing crazy there. So after if there's nothing in the actual users overview, then I'll go to analysis. And these are all pre-built analytics and queries. So I'll immediately go down to shortest path. And then I do shortest path to high value targets. So if you do that, you click on your domain and it's a little bit crazy. So then I start picking out like, okay, there's one of my users. He's a part of service accounts, which is a part of privileged IT accounts, which is can PS remote into there. All right. So like I said, like this is a little bit crazy. So we are going to look at a different way because this is showing basically everything, all the high value targets. So let's do shortest path to domain admins. Okay, so this is a lot clearer actually. Okay, so shortest path to domain admins from our owned account. So we have service account, which is a member of privileged IT accounts, which is a member of account operators, which has generic all. Like if you right click on this and go to help, you can see it'll say the members of the group account operators have generic all privileges to the group exchange windows. This is also known as full control. This privilege allows the trustee, which is us, to manipulate the target object however they wish. So since Alfresco is a member of this, a member of this, and a member of this, then Alfresco has the generic all rights to do whatever we want to exchange windows, right? So the reason this is important because that's the first step in towards domain admin. So our first step is to change something on exchange on the exchange windows permissions, and then this has write deackle to the actual domain. So write deackle, if we right click that, says the members of the group exchange windows permissions at hackedbox.local have permissions to modify the DACL on the domain htb.local. With write access to the target object's DACL, you can grant yourself any privilege you want on the object. So with that being said, if we go to abuse info, we can see that we can grant ourselves DC sync rights with this privilege. So in the DC sync, so essentially what a DC sync is if you're in an actual like production environment and you need to add another domain controller to the domain, you will add the domain controller and then give that new domain controller the ability to DC sync with the other domain controller that's already there. And the DC sync basically gets all of the information from the original domain controller and copies it to the new domain controller. So essentially, if we have DC sync rights as a user, then we can dump all of the passwords, hashes, usernames, anything we want from the domain controller. So that's what we are going to do. So if we recap this, our first step is to modify exchange windows. We need to be put into this group, right? Because right now we're only a member of account operators group. So we need to use our privileges of account operators to put us into the exchange windows permission group, and then give ourselves, or give another user is what we're going to do, the DC sync right to the domain. So that way we can dump everything in the domain. So let's get out of Bloodhound now. And our first stop is to add ourselves to the, go back to this. Our first stop is to add ourselves to the exchange windows permissions group. So if we go to generic all, or if we go to the path in between, we go to abuse info, it'll actually show you. So there are at least two ways to do this attack. The first and easiest one is just use the net group command, which is what we're going to do. So we're just going to copy that. Now the only two differences are this domain admins. We can't add ourselves to domain admins. We want to add ourselves to exchange windows permissions, and then we want to use our username right here. So we are going to get rid of this. So we are actually going to create a new user. So net, we need to be in winrm. So we can do net user, let's say Luffy, and then right after that you put the password for the user, which we'll just do password 123 exclamation mark, and then we'll do add to domain. Okay, cool. So now that we have Luffy in the domain as the password of password 123 exclamation mark, we can use this to add Luffy to the exchange windows permissions group. Exchange windows permissions group. All right, so net group, exchange windows permissions, the username, and then we're adding them into the domain group of that. So now it's successful. Now if we go net user Luffy to check see what it is, what groups he's in, we have that. All right, so now if we go to, so step one is complete. We have Luffy added to exchange windows permissions. The second thing we're going to do is give Luffy DC sync rights. So if we right click this, goes to abuse, then we can copy and paste all these, and obviously changing, like here's the domain, test labs right here, and then the username, we're going to change that. And then right at the end here, we're going to add Luffy to get DC sync rights. So we will copy all that stuff down, and we'll go to our notes. So I copied all this stuff in, and we can, obviously change the password. We're setting a password to the secure password variable, and then we're setting this hackthebox.local Luffy to and the password variable to a credential variable. And then we are using power, I think it's power up maybe, to add the domain object ACL with the cred variable with a principal identity of Luffy, and then we're giving him DC sync rights. So let's go back to the Kali and make sure we have what we need. I'm pretty sure this is, oh, it's power view, not power up. Okay, so we need to import power view. Okay, so even when RM has an upload feature, you just have to use a full path from your local machine to upload. So let's upload, I think it's root, downloads, power view. Okay, and now we have power view in there. We need to import it. So if you do a dot space dot backslash, this will import and run the script. So now it's good. Now we should be able to copy and paste these commands that we got out of Bloodhound. So that's the first one. That's the second one. Now, before we do the last one, I want to make sure earlier, if you do net user Luffy, okay, there's a cleanup script that was basically taking us out of this group. So I had to add him a few times earlier, but he's still in there now. So we'll just use that. Then give him DC sync rights. So now this hangs up for a minute, but what we can do is go to another thing in the terminal, and then we will use secrets dump, so in packet secrets dump, right? And then 164.24. So what this is going to do is this is going to dump all of the hashes from the domain controller now that we have DC sync rights. And then we are going to do Luffy instead. Luffy at 10.129.164.24. Boom, and then our password was password123 exclamation mark. And we are dumping all of the credentials from the domain controller. So there's a few things that it does here. You'll notice that at the top here, so it dumped the domain administrator credential, and then it dumps all of these. So if you see anything that's like 31D64 like this is a, like this default account has the same thing. That's just a blank password. So all of these right here, they're all blanks, all of that. Some of these have passwords. So now we have the actual users. So if you took these and you went and you could try to crack these to get actual passwords out of here to move laterally to other machines. But this, since we have the domain administrator credentials, this will work for everything. So now that we have this, we could just take this, the domain administrator hash, we could crack this, or we can just use winrm. Evil winrm. So with that domain administrator hash, let's go to 164.24. Administrator, that's the hash. Then we sign in. Like I said before, usually it's on the desktop of whatever user you're on. Okay, and then we got root.txt right there. So now, since this is about notes, we need to go back to our notes and show everything that we have been doing. So back to OneNote. Okay, so once we got into WinRM as service alfresco, the first thing we did was whoami/all. We were going to make that, and then didn't have anything useful. And then if you wanted to, I always just put it in there, just in case I have questions about it later. So those are the initial groups and privileges that Service Alfresco had. And then after that, we used SVC Alfresco with Bloodhound to enumerate domain ACLs, permissions, which that's about it. ACLs and permissions. GPOs. All right, and then we will show our sweet graph that we had. I don't like that one, so we'll do another one. Okay. And then this properly shows our graph of how we got to dump the DC credentials. So obviously, like I said, we went from our, I don't like that one either because it doesn't have all the usernames on it. Okay, third time's charm. There we go. So now it has all the usernames on it, all the nested groups that got us to the Exchange Windows permissions group, and then how we use that to DC sync into the domain controller. So after that, the chain of attack is service alfresco at hackthebox.local is a member of service accounts, which is a member of privileged IT accounts, which is a member of account operators, which has full control over the Exchange Windows permissions group. Okay, and then so that was step one. Step one is to add a user to the Exchange Windows permissions group. Step two was to give that user DC sync rights to the domain controller, since Exchange Windows permissions have write the ACL privileges over the domain. Cool. So that was our path that we used, and we have the screenshot showing it. Now we need to show how we got there. So we use the following commands to add a user named Luffy to the domain. Creating a credential object, or a credential object with Luffy and his password. Finally, we'll just do that first. Okay, so here are the commands. Okay, and then the third thing that we need to do is, finally, we gave Luffy DC sync rights and dumped the domain credentials from the domain controller. Okay. Boom. And if you want, you can add screenshots in this. Sometimes I add screenshots, sometimes I just use the commands. The commands are already there, so I might as well just use the commands. If you were doing this on a report, I would definitely use the screenshots instead. You could do that and then go to we did forget one step though. Add Luffy to the domain. Import and run powerview.ps1 and then creating a credential object. Okay, so just getting a screenshot of us doing all of that. So we added Luffy and then uploaded. So that's the screenshot of adding Luffy and then uploading PowerView. And then this is a screenshot of importing and running PowerView and then creating the credential object. Okay. And then finally, we will put the screenshot of us giving Luffy DC sync rights. Cool. And then finally, we can put the screenshot in of us using secrets dump and dumping all the hashes. Using mPacket secrets dump to dump all the hashes from the DC. Perfect. And the only last thing that I would do is add since we're on Hack the Box, we will just add a little proof.txt. And we don't have to show that, the actual proof, so that way you can actually do it yourself and go through these steps. But that's it. So That's how I take notes. If you're taking the OSCP, what your report needs to do is when you send it to them, they need to be able to look at these screenshots and these notes and replicate everything that you have done in that box. So I'm confident that everything that I have in here, that I have showed on here, they can see all of the commands that I wrote, how I cut all the usernames, how I use the usernames in the ASREP roast, how I cracked it. They can do everything exactly how I did it and get domain credentials out of it. So that's ultimately the end goal. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, I'm on LinkedIn. You can leave a comment. I am going to make more videos about exactly what ASREP roasting does, exactly what Kerber roasting does. If you have any ideas on what you would like to see next, as far as like OSCP level attacks or even writing a full report, I can show you that on multiple boxes. Thank you. See you later.